some of you may be thinking, Sonic before the sequel? I've never heard of that game before, to which I say, welcome to Fan Game Month.
Fan games, games made by the fans of a series. While fan art and fan fiction is the most prevalent and often including fan characters, there's remixes of songs that fans have done, but none can hold a candle to the ultimate labor of love, making their own game to show their dedication to the fandom. Fan games often go unheard of due to the fact that the only way you hear about them is through word of mouth, or through random web searches because fan games are usually made by a ragtag group of people or sometimes just one person. Additionally, fan games have no marketing as they can't be sold because that would be copyright infringement. On the occasion, a site like Kotaku or Joystick may talk about a fan game if it's really good. Some game companies are really strict when it comes to fan games. Squeenix sent a cease and desist letter to a group that were doing a 3D remake of Chrono Trigger. Hasbro sent a cease and desist letter to a group that were making the My Little Pony fighting game. And it leaves us scratching our heads thinking, why litigate when they can offer to publish the game and give them a cut of the profits? It's a group of people making a game for you that you don't need to pay exorbitant developer salaries. Or why not hire them to work for your company? Clearly they have the talent, as the two games I mentioned looked and played like it was done by professionals.
But there are companies out there that are pretty cool with people making fan games, Sega being one of them, which explains why that there's so many Sonic fan games out there.
Sonic Before the Sequel was created by Feperd, using the Sonic Worlds game engine, and the latest version was released in 2012. At the Sonic Amateur Game Expo 2012, Jun Sano said that he liked the soundtrack for the game, which is one thing that the game was widely praised for. Graphically, the game is gorgeous, like something that would be on the Genesis if it was pushing it to its graphical limits. The music, of course, is nowhere near capable of what the Genesis hardware could do, unless it was a Sega CD32X game. Yeah, those existed, but there's only about 5 or 6 of them. The sprites used for Sonic looks like it was using the Sonic 3 sprite as a base, but he really made it its own thing. This is the best 2D Sonic sprite based on a classic Sonic art that I've seen. It's much better than the original Genesis sprites. The music fits the levels perfectly and feel very Sonic-like, specifically very much like Sonic CD, which this game draws some inspiration from, as some of the graphics and even some of the robots look similar to the ones seen in Sonic CD, although the sprites are either recolors or just edits.
The game has a really good presentation. There's added cutscenes that use edited sprites from the Sonic screensaver, and it even edited clips from the Sonic CD intro and ending. It just adds that extra bit of love to this project.
The gameplay is pretty much the classic 2D Sonic gameplay, like straight from the Genesis days more so than Sonic 4 Part 1 or 2 ever did. It really captures what made the classic 2D games the classic games they are today, capturing that high-speed platforming action we all know and love while giving us some beautiful imagery. The levels are designed to accommodate Sonic speed with lots of slopes, loops, springs, and platforms. I'm guessing that this game was made in the Games Factory or Multimedia Fusion, as a lot of games produced by that software use the Z, X, and C keys by default for inputs, and in this case Z key jumps. The sad thing is, you can't use a PC controller unless the programmer makes it possible. And in this case, I plugged in my controller to see if it would work, but it didn't. So I find my hand cramping up about after an hour of play.
This is one of those times where I just have to play through the pain, because this game gives such an authentic Sonic feeling.
This game is fast too, faster than any of the Genesis games could ever achieve. Granted, that's obvious because the game is running on PC hardware. It's a perfect blend of speed and platforming. Sonic has 3 speeds, the running speed that we're used to from the Genesis days, and then there's the sped up pace like when he runs down slopes or opens a box containing the speed shoes, and then there's a 3rd speed where Sonic puts his arm behind him and there's a brief rush of wind as he's taking off at lightning speed. However, that 3rd speed is rarely accessed, as you only go that fast on extremely steep and long slopes. Sonic can spin dash and use the peel out, but sadly it's not a figure 8. Tails is also playable as the stages alternate between him and Sonic. He can fly and swim like he could in Sonic 3. His stages are built like Sonic's, but you can take advantage of his flight ability to bypass a lot of hazards or take shortcuts. Every stage has 3 acts and a 4th boss act. The bosses aren't really creative. Sonic's revolve around running after Eggman as Eggman fires fireballs at Sonic, and Tails' bosses deal with a robot that fires energy and has to do with a rotation mechanic.
The bosses are really the only challenge in this game, not because they're hard, but because the physics are just a little way too bouncy.
When fighting a boss, regardless of how much momentum you have when hitting them, you fly off of them and get shot to the other side of the screen. Sometimes hitting an enemy in the regular stages causes you to bounce wildly off. The underwater physics are nearly non-existent. There is some slowdown, but it's hardly noticeable. It feels more like space physics, being more floaty due to less gravity rather than sluggish due to water pressure. But other than those 2 instances, the physics are pretty close to perfect. The story takes place between Sonic 1 and Sonic 2, hence the name Before the Sequel. Sonic is chasing after Eggman and saves Tails without really noticing him. Sonic is dead set on stopping Eggman, and Tails, after being saved, decides to follow Sonic. It's revealed that Eggman is putting together his greatest creation, the Death Egg, and because this is a Sonic game, we know how it's going to end. Sonic stops Eggman, and Sonic and Tails become best friends. It also explains where the 7th Chaos Emerald is, and for a fan story, this is really good quality.
Granted, there's no dialogue and all the cutscenes are done through pantomime, but it's done really well, making it pretty easy to understand what's going on.
For a fan game, this is really good. If this was released on the Genesis back in those days, it would probably have been the best Sonic game of its time. This is a fan game that I find myself coming back to just as much as I go back to Sonic 3 and Knuckles, as it's just so much fun and there's so much to discover, as there's many alternate paths to take and even alternate acts if you find a different signpost at the end of the stage. I highly recommend downloading this game if you can find it. I had a bit of a hard time locating it, as even its own website isn't the most user-friendly. And that's the sad thing about fan games. Sometimes they just get lost to the depths of the internet and are left to rot, but this is one that you have to play. I would like to see Sega offer Lake Feperd some cash and resources to publish this game and put it on the PlayStation Network, Xbox Live, and Nintendo Network, because this guy has some real talent.
Even though fan games can't be sold, I'm ironically giving it the rating of full price because of its professional grade quality.